Hi, it's Ron Blitz with Product Marketing and Visualization. What we're going to do here is run through essentially the demonstration and presentations that we did at Tnhh back in June. So give you a full introduction of the visualization product that we're going to be introducing later this year. A number of people have helped to pull this together and will be participating in the demonstration and presentation. Cheryl will be providing a discussion about some of the hardware capabilities. Gordon Daly and Mark Hobbs will be co-chairing some demonstrations through the presentation today. And special thanks to a couple of our commercial engineers, Kylie Gregory, Mike Anthony, and Adam Gregory, for their assistance in pulling together the demonstrations themselves. I guess first off, we're going to run through the presentation here, and then when we're all done, we'll open up the line so that we can provide a Q&A session toward the end. So first off, all the information that we are presenting here is to be considered confidential and is not to be disclosed without having appropriate confidentiality agreements in place. Right now, our current plan is to start making this information public at Automation Fair. So we're tentatively planning to be on the show floor, as well as we'll be doing some demonstration sessions, both public demonstration sessions and even private demonstration sessions at Automation Fair. The current product, and we'll talk about this in more detail toward the end, is slated to be released in the second half of next year. If you do have customers that you feel need to be brought up to speed before Automation Fair, and we are doing a couple of these as we speak, please contact one of the names listed here, and we'll work to coordinate with you to provide a appropriate presentation and discussion with those customers. So as far as the agenda, our plan is to go through kind of a brief introduction of the new product and what's going on. Then Cheryl will come on and talk through some of the design or the hardware capabilities of the new PanelView 5000 terminals. And then we'll talk about some of the design software capabilities, go through some, I'd say, really important capabilities that more tightly integrate this with Logic. And then we'll talk through some of the project timelines and the capabilities and when new things will be released. So first off, the Logix business has already launched essentially the first of its next generation of controllers. The L7X is out and available. My understanding is the L3, the new series L3, L2, and L1 controllers are slated to be start being released either later this year or early in 2012. This is really important because what we're doing with the new PanelView product is more tightly coupling and integrating the capabilities of the PanelView 5000 product and the new Logix controllers. So at an initial release, the PanelView 5000 will only be able to talk to this new class of controllers. So that's really important as we want to start migrating our customers forward into this new family of Logix controllers so that we can take advantage of that with the new PanelView product. Additionally, we have, over the course of the last year, released a lot of new capabilities in our existing visualization product lines. We released new hardware with the PanelView Plus 6.0. We've got new software with Factory Talk View 6.0. We've got a new line of XT computers. So we are continuing to extend and enhance the existing product line, essentially to breathe new life into it and maintain that product as we go forward. As I mentioned in the previous slide, PanelView 5000 is slated to actually be released in the second half of next year, with the initial product introduction occurring at Automation Fair. As far as what we would direct you to do today would be to continue to sell and focus on the existing products that are there and shipping today. And when it's appropriate for us to start pushing the new product, we'll make sure that we give you that heads up. So how does the new product fit in? Today we have essentially two distinct tiers of product families. We've got the integrated architecture class, which includes PanelView Plus, as well as Factory Talk View. We also have a component-based line toward the bottom, which is PanelView Component, PanelView Standard, Enhanced, RS-232. And essentially what we're doing with PanelView 5000 is building a product family that will fit essentially across the top tier here. The PanelView 5000 is the first of a series of products, and we'll talk about what those are coming up. But essentially we're building a new platform that will fit in the integrated architecture class of products going forward. That being said, we are committed to continuing to maintain the existing products, and we'll continue to ship those products for many, many years to come. Okay, so as we said, we've got a new product line that's coming out. Initially, it's going to be released as a operator interface, and some of our goals here are to provide essentially captivating visualization, and that comes in a number of forms, both from the standpoint of the graphical content and the presentation and the capabilities that the terminal is going to have, but also in the design environment to provide enhanced productivity. We also wanted unmatched integration with Logix. One of the things we're trying to do here is make this new product line be, in many respects, similar to how Kinetics Motion works with Logix. I mean, you could buy somebody else's motion solution and use it with Logix, but you wouldn't want to because you give up so much capability. We want our visualization to be that well integrated that people, going forward, it is essentially the default product that people would buy and use with our Logix controller. We also wanted complete scalability from a single development environment. So essentially our goal is, in many respects, similar to Logix, in that you can build in the design environment a single application that can load into compact Logix, or with a small change can load into a control Logix. You build the code and it can work in either place without really having to be modified. We want the same kind of capability with a visualization product. Today we've got a little bit of portability for content that is built in PanelView Plus, so that it can migrate forward into a View SE, but we can't go the other way. As we go forward with this new product line, the View 5000 product line, we'll have complete portability, so content built in one place can be run in another. As you said, we're building all new hardware as well as taking advantage of new software technologies to do this. The pictures here kind of show a representation of the new product family and what components are going to be made up of that. At the small end, really focused at smaller, more standalone types of machines. We'll have the 5300, so PanelView 5300 product line. As we go into the mainstream product tier, really focused at larger, more integrated machines, we'll have the 5500 in the future. And those first two are actually going to be available at the first release of this product when it becomes available later in 2012. The 5700 will be a larger, again, more capable product. That's going to be in the future, as well as we plan to have PC versions of this, both a station as well as a distributed, that would be able to run in a personal computer in a Windows environment. So again, being able to take application content that is designed for any one of those tiers and be able to migrate that forward or backward as appropriate within the other products that are in the family. Some of the other key capabilities that we're focusing on, design time productivity, visualization. We're trying to make the new product aware of the structures and the tag capabilities that are available in Logix. Today in most visualization products, you have the ability to link to tags, and while they may be capable of interacting with lower level values, they don't really manage data types and structures the way they're managed in Logix. We plan to make the capabilities in PanelView 5000 be completely aware of data structures in the design environment, ability to bind and link graphical content to those data structures more directly, and provide that same kind of typecasting. And that does a number of things for us. One of the first things referenced here is I can do auto filtering based on the type of tag that's being referenced. So for example, if I build a valve graphic, I could link it to a valve data type in Logix, and then when I use that valve graphic, I can filter the list of tags that would be visible in the design environment to only show the valve tags that appear in my Logix projects. So it allows you, improved productivity because you can find the tags that you're interested in more quickly versus having to browse and manage through the whole library of tags that might exist in a Logix project. Additionally, we'll have filtering capabilities in the library, so I could even search and filter the list of graphical elements that can link to a specific tag by data type and find them more quickly. We also plan to provide full sharing of information between the control and visualization environment. So, for example, you build or create tags and structures in Logix, they'll be immediately available for your use in the View 5000 design environment. Also, we're modernizing the graphical environment, trying to bring it forward, taking advantage of scalable vector graphic capabilities so that graphics and content that you create can easily scale to the different sizes of terminals. So I could build something for a 10-inch, drop it on a 15-inch, it'll scale up, or vice versa, it will scale down to fit without you having to go in and edit it. So that will provide both improved productivity in how you build the screens, but also improved presentation of the content that you have on the screens. Because what we're finding is many systems integrators and OEMs want to actually use the presentation of the operator interface as a way to differentiate their machine from others that are in the environment. We're also providing some enhanced navigation capabilities and automating the creation of navigation, and those are some of the things that you'll see through the demonstration that we'll provide a little bit later. One of the other things that we're doing, and this is really, I think, kind of groundbreaking, is that we're more tightly integrating with the runtime of a Logix controller. In fact, many of the things that in the past would have existed in the operator interface have actually been pushed down into the Logix controller. Things like data logging, trending, and even some button jog operations, which again we'll talk about these as we get into the presentation. But we push that information into the Logix controller. The nice part there is that we can actually, the controller can collect the information faster than we can from an operator interface perspective, but it also maintains that information and can continue to collect it even if the operator interface were shut down. So you can come and go. It enables us in the future to go after maybe a mobile type of operation because the Logix controller will house and contain and collect the information for us. With that, I'll turn this over to Cheryl, who can talk about the hardware.
Okay, thank you, Ron. From our hardware, we're also looking at some key improvements to do along here. One of them is the display. We did look at a more variety of display sizes and resolutions, as well as going to the new LED backlight, which reduces the environmental impact, both in how it's made. There's no mercury in the backlight like a fluorescent does, so it helps with disposal and handling that way. It also helps reduce some of the current draw in order to turn on the backlight. Technology-wise, we are improving that. We have a faster processor in there. We have there's technology that we're using that will help us create those graphics much faster, and that can really be something that we can bring forward in the visualization software. And you'll see that we have a new industrial design with an improved bezel, product depth, and smaller footprint. Okay. So this is just kind of a comparison, so you can see how our Panel View Plus looks to this one's a Panel View 5500. So it does have a new bezel design. It has the scalable vector graphics. You'll see more on that later on, and a navigation button on there, which they'll go over later on. The one thing on here to show is that we did decide to go to a smaller cutout and a smaller overall dimension, mainly in the width is where we're looking at. We still are planning to do some support of adapter plates, so when it comes time to migrate existing applications years from now to the Panel View 5500 or 5300, we have a method to do that. Okay. So here is kind of a quick summary of the 5500, Panel View 5500. You'll notice a lot of display sizes you're familiar with, a 6.5, 10.4, 15-inch, all in the standard aspect ratio. We'll be adding a 19-inch touch to that. And then on that 6.5, 10.4, and 15-inch, we'll have a keypad with a touch screen. In addition to this, we are adding two wide aspect ratio displays, a 9-inch and a 12-inch touch. So both of these would be just touch. There won't be a keypad available. If you look on the left side, you can see the profile of the product. It is a much slimmer bezel that does help in food applications to make sure that there's not accumulation of dust or dirt or food. It makes it a little easier to clean. It is also a aluminum bezel. The displays are TFT like we have today, and everything is going to be color. We're not going to have grayscale on this or STN color. Everything is TFT. The backlight is all LED backlight, as I mentioned before. We still have the resistive analog touchscreens. So if you notice on all the touchscreen ones, there is a navigation button on them. So this will actually help you with navigating through the displays. Then if you also, on the 10-inch products, going back to the displays, they will actually be a higher resolution at an SVGA instead of VGA. So the 10 inches will get a higher display resolution. And then all of these will have the device level ring and DC and AC power options. Okay. And the target price of these is going to be 25% less than the PanelView Plus is today. All right. So this is the back of the design here. You notice it does look very similar to the PanelView Plus 6. Some things that are different here is the DLR with the 2 ports on there and 1 IP address. We also have the audio out. That won't be enabled for the first release. It is functional, but the software features won't be available until a subsequent release. The mounting for this is going to use similar type of levers that are used on the PanelView Plus 400 and 600. But you'll notice on here we have the USB programming port, USB memory ports, SD card slots. Okay, thanks. Okay, moving on to the PanelView 5300. Don't have good pictures for this yet. The prototypes are still not photo ready. So this one is targeted at the same space as the PanelView Plus Compact is. But you'll notice there's a whole lot more display sizes. It goes all the way up to a 15-inch. All of these are touch. You notice there is no navigation button on there. That's a cost issue, but we will have a soft button for that. On the 5.7-inch, we have a VGA display. So we're going from quarter VGA to VGA. And part of the reason increasing the resolution is for text and being able to see the characters, alarms, things like that, especially when you get outside of English, European languages, Asian languages, you need to have that higher resolution. We also on the 5300 have a 4.3-inch display as well as the 9 and the 12-inch. And these are all wide aspect ratios. We like the wide aspect ratio in the 4.3 again for alarming capabilities. When people say they want a push-button replacement, they usually also mean that they want to see alarm messages. All of these will be DC powered. There won't be an AC option. There will be a choice of having a single Ethernet port on the smaller display sizes, which saves a little bit of money, or doing the DLR, which is available on all the display sizes, including the 12-inch and the 15-inch. And the target price on this one is 50% below where the PanelView Plus is today. So here's just a quick summary. 5300, the middle column here has that 4.3-inch wide and the 5.7-inch terminal. The 5500 has the 19-inch. The 5500 also has keypad with touch available on the 6.5, the 10.4, the 15-inch, and the navigation button on there as well. And that's available on all of the terminals for the 5500. The 5300 has that single Ethernet option available on the smaller display sizes. USB ports is the next thing that's a little bit different, just the number of ports, very similar to what we do today with the 400 and 600 versus the 700 to the 1500 on the PanelView Plus. Audio is only available on the 5500, and AC is only available as an option on the 5500. And one thing we haven't talked about is the PDF viewer. Both of these terminals will have a built-in PDF viewer. You can launch it from within your application and look at manuals. The 5500 will have additional viewers in the future. So the 5300 is going to be pretty well fixed. It's not going to have a lot of enhancements like the internet browsers and things like that. These are two different processors between the 5300 and the 5500. We're targeting the 5300 at those compact logics, L1Y, L2Y applications, kind of smaller, simpler applications on there. And the 5500 at the more graphic-intensive, data-intensive type of applications. Right now, we don't have the details to present, but we do plan to present that before the product releases, and we have more details. And with that, I turn it back over to Ron.
Okay, so just a reminder, while we're showing two different terminals here, the applications that you build can work with any of the Logix controllers. They're not limited to just the Logix controllers that are listed here. So the 53 can talk to an L7 and vice versa. And again, both products are configured and managed with the same design environment. One of the other changes that are going on, and we've talked about, maybe renaming or relabeling RSLogix for a couple of years now. And what's actually going to happen is, as we go forward with version 21, there's currently a plan to essentially rename RSLogix 5000 to Studio 5000. And Studio 5000 going forward will include both the Logix designer that we all know and love today, as well as a view designer. So Studio 5000 will encompass the ability to configure and manage your Logix controllers, as well as the View 5000 operator interface products. And there's currently no plan to change the pricing. So essentially the bundling, the catalog numbers that exist today, there may be some work to restructure a little bit of that going forward to maybe reduce the number of catalog numbers. But basically, as you order RSLogix today, you'll still order that in the future, and what you'll get is Studio 5000 that includes the ability to do both Logix as well as View 5000 products. And with that, I will turn over the mic to Mark Hobbs, who will talk a little bit about the design environment.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Good morning, everyone. Glad you're all on the call. As Ron mentioned, what we're going to do next is Gordon Daly and I are going to tag team, and we're going to show you a few short demos of the View Designer software. And in between demos, Ron is going to continue to present some PowerPoint on some of the features that will be in the initial release, but we're not in a position to demo today. Cheryl showed you a real nice overview of the PanelView 5000 hardware, and these software demos are going to show you the new Studio 5000 View Designer that will be used to create the projects for that hardware, as well as run on the terminal. Our goal for the software is to allow users to easily create very rich, powerful, and I think as Ron mentioned, captivating displays for the PanelView 5000 terminal, and do it in a manner that reduces their development time and cost when compared to our existing tools or competitive tools. One of the first things we did as we started to put the designer together is choose a layout and a framework for the software that would easily make all the tools required to create these screens readily available to the user. And that's really the focus of this initial short demo, is to just to give you a very high-level look at the overall framework and layout of the View Designer. The way the software is laid out by default is it gives the user a natural left-to-right workflow. So I'm going to start on the left side of the designer here, and you can see that the window that I have selected now is the Project Explorer. And the Project Explorer provides a nice organized view of the content within the project. Right now in the Project Explorer, we're showing the name of the project and the displays that are currently configured in the project, and we'll be adding additional content to this window between now and when we release. For example, we'll show you any references to the controllers and other types of project content in the Explorer. The other thing you can do from here is you can initiate some actions. So if I right-click on the project, I could create a new screen from here. Or if I right-click on a particular display, I'm able to open that display, rename it, or perhaps set it as the home screen. And the home screen, you can see, is indicated by the little home screen icon. So that's the Project Explorer. Just below that, we have our toolbox. Gordon, in the next demonstration, is going to provide a detailed view of the toolbox and the content within that. But in my opinion, this is the heart and soul of the View Designer. The toolbox is going to contain hundreds of graphic elements that will range from simple drawing elements that can be placed on a screen to complete faceplates that we'll provide for the View Designer. And you can see that given the fact that it's going to have a large content of graphic elements, they'll be organized in categories of things like common controls, different type of piping as an example, and you'll also have search capability, so that if you want to search for a particular graphic element, you can easily do that using the search element. This search capability will be used throughout the designer with a common look and feel, so we'll show you some other places as we continue with our demonstrations of how that search capability can be used. The center part of the View Designer here is where you create your screens. It hosts the screen editing canvas. What you get in the designer is the same look and feel for your screens that you'll actually get when you run your project on the terminal. You can see that I can have multiple screens open at one time. And I can easily tab between screens at the top in order to quickly select the screen that I want to work with. What I'm going to do is select the tank overview screen, and Gordon and I have been working on this project together, and you can see that he's the last person who edited the screen, and unfortunately he left it in a state that is undesirable. However, it does give me an opportunity to show you that, as you would expect with any world-class designer, I have the tools readily available to quickly clean this up. I can select my tank detail button, and I can bring that to the front where it rightfully belongs. I can also select my 3 tanks. You can see that the content of the toolbar is now expanded automatically for me, so that I can pull down my Align menu and align the top edges of the tanks. And I can also distribute them horizontally. So now I can quickly get the screen back to the way I want it. We're also introducing a new type of alignment with the View Designer that are called alignment guides. And I'll do this slowly so that things come through clearly over WebEx, but the alignment guides are little green lines that you get on the screen when you drag or move an object. And the green lines make it very easy to align this element with other graphic elements on the display. So I can come down here, and if I want to place the pump, sorry, let me try that again. I can easily use the alignment guides to get the pump put in place between the piping very easily. The other thing we have is easy access to nudge capability. So just by using the left, right, and top-down arrow keys on my keyboard, you can see that I can, if I need a further level of granularity, I can nudge the pump very easily. Okay, there's no double key stroke or anything that's required. You just select the graphic element on the screen and use the arrow keys to move that element around. So if I select my back button here, you can hold down the Shift key if you desire, and then when you nudge the object, you move by, I think it's 8 pixels by default. Let's talk a little bit about how the graphic elements on the screen are configured. In the top right corner of the designer here, you see the Properties pane, and the Properties pane is used to select or configure the properties of any element on the screen. So as I select different elements in the View Designer, you can see that the Properties pane automatically updates to show the properties of those elements. Even if I have a screen selected in the Project Explorer, the Properties pane will show me the attributes of the screen so that I can do some editing in that manner as well. What I can do here is I can select my tank. This is one of the nice high-quality graphics that was pulled out of the toolbox and placed on a display. The Properties tab is, again, organized in categories. So I have a category for my appearance attributes, my general attributes, as well as my layout attributes. The Properties pane includes inline editing with built-in editors for changing things like color. So if I want to change the color of the level of the tank, I can easily do that directly from the Properties tab. I can also change things like the opacity of the level. So I can come in, change the level opacity, and you can see my graphic element automatically updates to show me that change. Okay, one last example. If I select my pump control title for my pump panel, and I want to modify the text, once again I get an inline nice editor right in the Properties pane that allows me to configure the text layout, either being left, center, right aligned, or being able to choose the top, bottom, or middle. If I have multiple elements selected, the Properties pane will actually show me any elements any properties that both of those elements can contain. So that if you want to change the common property of multiple elements all at once, you can easily do that as well. Okay, in a later demo, we'll talk about the Properties pane in more detail and talk about that this same area is used to configure animations and events for elements. One of the things you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner of the designer is the Graphics Explorer. This is like the Objects Explorer that we had in Factory Talk View that customers really liked. We brought that forward into the View Designer. It shows me a hierarchy of all the elements that are on this particular graphics display. Obviously, we'll support grouping capability in the View Designer, and one of the nice things about the Graphics Explorer is it allows you to select the individual elements within a group so that you can configure their properties without having to ungroup the object, do your configuration, and then group everything back together. So that's the Graphics Explorer. Again, everyone should be familiar with that through the Object Explorer capability that we had in Factory Talk View. There's one last window to cover here. At the bottom of the designer, you can see that we have an errors window. And we haven't wired up that many things to the errors window yet, but the idea or the capability of this window is that it will show any validation, warnings, and errors that are associated with the project. Warnings would just be warnings. You can still deploy your project. If there's errors in the errors window, it gives you an indication of things that have to be corrected in the designer before you can deploy it and have your project run correctly on the terminal. And this will update in real time. So as an example, if I didn't have the path set between my terminal and the Logix controller, I would have an error message here indicating that to me. Once I configure that path, that error would automatically be removed. So that gives you a good overall feel for the default layout and framework of the designer. As everyone knows, users will have their own individual preferences. So you can easily take any of the panes or windows that we went over this morning, and you can easily undock them just by dragging and dropping them anywhere on the designer. You can then grab that window and you can redock it very easily. You can get little arrow guidelines to help you decide where you want to dock it. If I select the center area here, the Project Explorer and the toolbox are automatically turned into a tabbed control for me. Gordon's giving the next demo, and he actually doesn't like the designer configured in this manner, so I'm going to leave it just like that since he didn't leave my tank overview screen in a desirable state. One last thing to show you is that for any of the windows, like the Graphics Explorer window, there is also an auto hide feature that you can select. When a window is hidden, you can see that it shows up on the right-hand side here as a tab, and as I cursor over the tab, it pops out and allows me to use that particular editor. So with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Ron.
Okay, so a couple other things about the design environment. When the product releases, it will actually utilize the same communication package that Logix 5000 uses. So RSLinx Classic will be the underlying communication package that the design software uses to interact with the terminal. That means that you only have one package to install when you're installing Logix and RSLinx. You don't need to install yet another communication package for the view designer to be able to interact with the terminal. So, and it'll share the same RS2 browsers and the configuration that you use when you're using Logix, which is nice. As far as the terminal communications with the controllers, what we've actually done is leverage the communication stack that our current Logix Ethernet modules use. So we're actually sharing, the proven in-use capabilities of that Ethernet communication stack and leveraging that directly in the terminals themselves. Some of the other things that we're doing, by leveraging Ethernet, we have both the DLR capabilities that Cheryl discussed earlier. The terminal, when it initially releases, will have a single IP address for both of the ports, but in the future we actually plan for the standard and the larger terminals to support actually being able to split that out. But that gives you the ability with the DLR to actually support, essentially setting up systems that don't require an Ethernet switch or provide some fault tolerance, so if a cable were to break, you can keep the communications operating. One of the other things that we're doing is the new PanelView 5000 terminals will have the ability to actually interact with the controller. In addition to the Class 3 type of communications that we use today, the terminal will actually be able to support a Class 1 communications capability. We'll talk about some of the things that provide the high-speed jog capability coming up, where that becomes very valuable. But it both provides more accurate and timely communications, as well as providing enhanced diagnostic capabilities, both for the controller as well as the terminal. The project file underlying the Studio 5000 View Designer will be very similar in many respects to the way projects are managed in Logix. Today when you're managing projects in the view environments, you have this application manager where you have to bring various projects in to the environment before you can actually work on them. With this environment, we'll basically take the projects. They'll essentially be a single file on the disk. You can locate that file anywhere you want, either on your PC or even in a network share, and simply by double-clicking on that file, you'll be able to open it. So you don't have to move things in and out of a particular folder structure and manage them in a single place like you do today. Additionally, we'll provide a full project import-export capability, as well as a partial project import-export for the documentations that you can do translation. And this is valuable because, in many cases we find that some of the larger systems integrators will build tools to auto-generate the application development. Additionally, I like it because, I'm like the worst speller in the world, so I can actually export the documentation or the text that's on the screens, and I can run spell checker and re-import those and have it, as a way to fix up the content. The translation text, again, we're going to support multi-language capabilities, and this is a way for you to export the text that's on the screens, translate those, and provide language switching in the runtime. And with that, we'll shift over to Gordon, who will talk a little bit about the graphical capabilities.
Hi everyone, Mark gave us a nice overview of the designer. What I'm going to do now is dig in just a little bit deeper into a couple of specific areas just to explore together with you through a demo on what they contain. Looks like Mark was goofing with this last since I was here. I don't really like the toolbox being where it's at, so give me just a minute to put this where it actually belongs down below. Let's look first at the toolbox. The toolbox, like Mark mentioned, he was right in calling it the heart and soul of the application, but he was very, very inaccurate by saying that we were only going to include hundreds of predefined graphic objects. We're actually on track to have well over 1,000 for the first release of the product. We've already got almost 800 that have been built already. And that's great that there's going to be lots of these graphic elements that are going to be available for you to use. But we wanted to make sure, because there's so many of them, that it was going to be really easy for you to find what you're looking for. So like Mark had showed earlier, we're going to have a categorization of all those graphical elements in a multi-level hierarchy in the middle area, and then down below the listing of what belongs in those. But let's just take a peek at one of those predefined objects that I particularly like a lot, which is an industrial blower. So I'm just going to type in to the search area the term blower, and when I search, what you'll see is that it pops right up. Now there's two ways that I can put this onto the screen. I can either drag and drop it directly on, and you can see that it shows up, or it's as easy as a double click, and it'll cascade them for me automatically. Well, I don't need three of them. I'll start with one, and what you'll notice is that I'm going to resize this object to make it very, very large on the screen. And because these objects are built in a a vector graphic format, regardless of how they're expanded or they're shrunk down, you always will maintain a perfect graphic fidelity given whatever resolution you've got. And that's a fantastic thing. So these objects are not just beautiful in whatever size you show them on, but they're also very, very interactive, and they're intelligently built so that they're as useful as possible for any screen that you're using them on. So with this selected, I'm going to look over to the Properties pane. I'm going to change the fill color. Now, if you were to try to change, through some sort of color animation, the color of objects with a lot of different products that are out there in the HMI world today, what you're going to get is kind of one big blob of that color. But notice as I pick the green, what happens is it's maintaining that fantastic look and feel, because we've built these in a way that can really showcase that. So regardless of what color I choose, whether light or dark, it's still looking great no matter what I choose. So that makes it so that all these objects are that much more useful, for you. So in addition to resizing it, let's just real quick do a slight little turn to this guy to show you that rotation is also fully supported, and everything is fully dynamic and supports whatever properties that you set it, just the way you'd hope. And what you'll find is that as you enjoy creating these great-looking graphics, you may say to yourself, boy, I wouldn't want to do that for every graphic on every screen, and that's why you'd want to make it reusable. Well, let me show you how easy it is to make reusable in the Studio 5000 View Designer. Whatever it is that I want to bundle together, whatever elements I want to bundle together to make a reusable object, I just right-click on them when they're selected, and what you'll see is a context menu that pulls up. And one of those options is a Create Add-on Graphic. So you might say to yourself, hey, add-on graphic, that sounds familiar. Well, it does, because in Logix, of course, you can create add-on instructions, which are reusable instructions that can encapsulate other instructions so that you can be more productive in your work. Well, in the same way that we believe that add-on instructions are superior to a lot of other programmable controller paradigms for encapsulating that logic, in the same way we think that add-on graphics are a great way to make your object reusable. So we want to make sure that people understand the linkage that's going to be possible with add-on graphics, with add-on instructions. So when I choose add-on instruction, I'll be asked for a name of that instruction. I'm just going to call it my blower, since it's something that I created. And what you'll notice is that your editing experience just continues as you were. Now, instead of that being an individual element, what it is now is actually a new element instance of a type called my blower that I created. So what we've done now is we've created this definition for my blower object that's available to use on all of the screens, as well as creating that first instance that I have on the screen. If I were to look over to the toolbox now and search for the term blower again, what you'll notice is that now that object is now available to be used and can be found in the toolbox. So again, the way that you use the system is very consistent. When you create reusable objects, they're extremely easy to edit, create and edit, and they show up in the toolbox like all other graphical elements do. If I wanted to edit it, the editing experience is pretty easy to find. you just right-click on the object and say Edit Add-on Graphic. Well, now since Mark he's really an expert at building these screens, I'm gonna look at one of his examples of reusable objects as a way to see how it's really done right. So let's go back over to the tank overview screen, and here Mark had created 3 different tanks, and he's a smart guy, so he didn't want to do work more than once, let alone 3 times. So what he did was to create a reusable object. So when I have one of those selected, you'll see that the type is of type main tank, which is one that he created, and he's got 3 of them. The first one is 01, the second one is 02, the third one is 03. So let's go ahead and take a peek inside to see how he created it. And you do that by just right-clicking on it and saying Edit Add-on Graphic. So you'll notice that your context now has changed away from the screen, and your editing experience is now focused on editing the definition of that object, because definitions don't belong on screens. The definition of that object can be changed and then reapplied wherever it's used. So inside, when I take a quicker peek, I see that I've got 2 elements in here. I have a text display at the top, and I've got a full-blown tank at the bottom. And what you'll notice when I change the level color, I'm going to change it to a handsome-looking green, that when I change that color, if I were to go back to the tank overview screen, you know what's going to happen. They all change accordingly. And that's the beauty of it being reusable. You can edit it after it's been built. But you may say to yourself, well, that's helpful that I can change them all, but what if I want to override any particular instance with a particular setting? Well, we think that we've done a nice job of making it so that you can specify parameters for any object through the Properties pane. But if I wanted to change the color, I don't see a property for the color for my tank level. Well, what you can do is go back to edit that add-on graphic, and you have the ability now to create the properties that you want, that are additional properties that you want to have for your reusable objects, so that your instances can give that information explicitly different for each instance on an instance-by-instance basis. So, sure, a lot of other HMI utilities allow you to pass parameters to objects that are reusable, but there's a number of reasons why we believe that the View Designer here does a lot better job of that. The first one is I can actually specify and name the property specifically. So rather than just being forced to have them in a specific order when I provide the instance information, I can actually explicitly give the names of those properties, which makes it a lot easier when people are using those objects. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's make it so that we can expose the level color. Well, if I was to click the shortcut for making a new alias for that onto my add-on graphic, what you'll notice is that it created a new property called Property 5 for me that's alias to the color, and will automatically provide the description of that, which is to determine the color of the contents inside. So I'll simply edit the name and call it Tank Content, Tank Color. And when I go back to the Tank Overview screen, and you'll see that I still have that tank selected, you'll notice that I have a new property called Tank Color. So here's where I can come in and pick a color or type a color in. Let's say I wanted it to be blue, and you can see how this instance is now given the explicit property value of blue. So if I were to go back to the tank, and I happen to know that Mark's a big milk drinker, and so by default, we need to have enough milk, because I really care about Mark, and I want him to live a healthy lifestyle so I can spend as much time with him as possible. I'm going to go ahead and change by default for that color to be white, because that's the color of milk. So I'm going to just choose white. When I go back to the tank, what you'll notice is that all of the ones that are getting the default value are now white, and the tank that we explicitly set to be blue is still blue. So the editing experience for the reusable graphics is a very natural one, because it's the same rules applied to add-on graphics that do with predefined graphics, and that I just specify the properties for those instances through the property pane. The next distinction that I want to draw to why we really like add-on graphics is I'm going to just reiterate something that Ron said, and that is, now that the view designer is really logics aware, and we're really tuned into how structures work, I can actually specify the property types to be of a particular data type structure. So if I say that I want a particular UDT to be expected for a property type, there's two really neat things that happen. The first thing that happens is that I can now, within the definition, I can now more easily browse through and choose the members of the data type that's coming in as parameterized data, or the property types, so that I can link really, really easily the member data of UDT structures to what's in the elements on the definition. Secondly, and you're going to like this, by knowing what properties exist by knowing the data types that are expected for those properties, when I go to browse for tags, we can actually automatically filter out all of the tags that don't belong of that type, so that instead of looking at 10,000 tags you might have in your project, you're now only seeing the subset that are the expected or even acceptable tags to choose. So your ability to really link up the data with where it needs to go, both in terms of the hierarchical structure of the UDT and in terms of just sheer selecting what's sensible, is going to save you a ton of time. The last piece that I'm going to preview just in conversation before Mark does his demo is that inside of the definition, it's not just a matter of specifying the properties that apply to specific objects, but you can also now do more dynamic things with those graphic elements in a really simple and intuitive and powerful way. And that's through complex animations that we're going to make available to you. That's through an events and commands infrastructure that is very similar to what you might be familiar with in SE, where based on an event trigger I want a command to be run. And then also the ability to build state tables, so that based on the incoming data from a tag or an expression, I can choose to set a whole host of different properties. So all of that behavior of all those different methods can be all wrapped up and encapsulated in an add-on graphic, which gives it the same kind of power that an add-on instruction has too. Next, let me just take that same thought of reusability that we just learned about from add-on graphics, and let's apply that to screens. So just like an add-on graphic had a property definition below the add-on graphic, our screens also have a property definition below them. So here's where we can specify what properties exist for screens, so that we now have the ability to assign those properties when we navigate to the screen. So let me just show you one that's already populated, which is the tank detail screen. Here you'll see that Mark has already filled in 5 different incoming properties that apply to that screen. Well, the beauty of it is one, we can make it navigating to those screens and changing what properties are sent to them easier, but we're also able to create shortcuts for those screens and make those screens more reusable in that way too. So if I were to right-click on the tank detail and say create shortcut, what happens is a new shortcut screen is created. I'm going to call it tank 1 detail. And when I open that screen shortcut, you'll notice that, hey, it probably makes sense that I can't edit the content of that screen because the content in that screen is defined in the tank detail. But here's where I can assign the properties for that shortcut. So now whenever someone were to navigate to the tank 1 detail, I could just specify a set of properties to be applied to this shortcut. So it's just an easier way to keep track and to manage and to reuse the screens. The last piece I want to show real quick, because I'm probably going longer than I probably should, is the ability to use already predefined status graphics that we're going to have pre-built. So the kind of graphics we're going to have include really helpful general equipment, lots of different shapes and symbols and static objects like country flags and signs and those kinds of things. But also, it's exciting to say that we're working on creating status graphic elements. What we find when we visit customers in a consistent way is it doesn't matter, really what type of industry we go to visit customers. A lot of them, a good chunk of them, are using their own resources to build status information for Rockwell equipment. Well, in order to save their time, what we're doing is we're building these on our own for you so that you don't have to. So what I've done is I've created this screen, which shows a number of different pre-built devices that we've used for our demo here today. It's as simple as specifying where the tag exists to provide that status information, or even better than that, where the path is to that device. So now you don't have to worry about writing any Logix code to retrieve all that information. It's all done for you. So with that, it's my turn to pass it over to Ron, who's up next.
Okay. So as Gordon showed, we have a plethora of graphics, and so probably one question in your mind was, how does this compare with where we are today and where competitors are? And this snapshot and the following slides show a comparison of some of the different graphical capabilities. So, kind of on the left is where we are today with our FactoryTalk View product. In the center is the Symbol Factory Library, which is kind of state-of-the-art pretty much across the industry for most of the vendors that are out there today. And on the right is the new View 5000 and its scalable vector graphic capabilities. And while we've seen one or two competitors start to move in the direction of scalable vector graphics, I think we're kind of leading the charge here. We expect in time that pretty much the other vendors will move there as well in the future. Again, kind of comparing and contrasting, you can see kind of where we are today with some of the chassis in Rockwell equipment, as well as tanks and pumps and the like, and how that compares with where we are today, Symbol Factory graphics, and where View 5000 is going to be. Okay, as we said, we're planning to take full advantage of the information that you develop when you're creating your Logix project. So, for example, one of the things that you do in the View Designer is you point at one, or in the case of the 5500, 4 different Logix projects that are going to be associated with the screens and the content that you're creating. And what happens when you do that is we actually harvest all of the information out of those Logix projects so that that information is readily available to you when you're working on your application screens for a View 5000 terminal. So you've got the tag definitions, something new here called metadata, and we'll talk about that in a slide coming up. Alarm information, data type information, and even data log content, and again we'll talk about what those are coming up. But all that information is brought over. It's actually cached inside of the project that you're building in View Designer, so that that information is readily available both when you're connected up or have access to the Logix project, as well as if you were to take your View project, go home and start working on it. You still have a cached copy of the information, so you can continue to browse tags and data types and use that information when you're building your project. Then when you come back to work the next day, it will be able to sync back up with the Logix project. So if you have multiple people working together, they can kind of go apart for a while, work independently, come back together, and any changes that the Logix designer did to maybe the tags or the data types that are in that project will actually be propagated automatically and be picked up in the View project. So you don't have to go back in. If he renamed a tag, you don't have to go back in and search for the old tag name and rename it manually. We'll automatically pick that up and switch the graphics to use the new names as appropriate. Again, eliminating some of the work that would have had to have been done and avoiding, more importantly, avoiding the application being broken because somebody renamed the tag. Okay, with that, we'll shift gears again, and Mark will provide a demonstration on some of the tag capabilities.
Okay, thanks, Ron. It's Mark again, everyone. As Ron mentioned, we're running a little bit long here, so I'm going to make up a little bit of time. This next demo is going to really focus on how to associate the View Designer application with your Logix application in terms of being able to browse to tags and set up the runtime communications. And then I'll also talk in a little bit more detail about the animation and events capability that we'll have in the first release of the product. So let's start by taking a look at how to associate your project with the Logix project. There is actually a menu system that can be used, although you can see from the previous demos that you're not dependent on it. I selected the project properties dialog, and this dialog has several purposes. First of all, the look and feel and the user interface of this dialog has been updated significantly and will be for the first release, but its purpose remains the same. There's two tabs on this dialog. There's a tab for the terminal, and in this tab you'll see all of the things that are required to associate your project with the terminal that you're designing it for. And currently in the software, there's only a single property to select the device or the panel view terminal that your application is associated with. The second tab is the controllers tab. And with this tab, you're basically associating your application with the Logix application. And there's two things to really be concerned about. One is the setting up the path for browsing for tags. So associating tags within the View Designer to the Logix application for Release 1 is going to be done using the offline ACD file for the Logix project. So this field that I've selected here just allows you to browse out and select the ACD file that you want to associate with your application. And it can be multiple ACD files, although in today's demo we're just connecting and using one physical controller, but you can define multiple. And then lastly, the IP field here is used to establish your runtime communication from the terminal to the Logix controller. And in this case, you define the IP address of your Ethernet card as well as the slot within the chassis that your processor is located in. And you will be able to get an RS2 browse so that you can go out over the network and select your controller in that manner as well. We just haven't implemented it yet. Really, that's all you need to do in order to configure your application and start using it with your Logix project. I'm going to go back to the tank detail screen, and I'm just going to show you the new common tag browser. So I'm going to select our tank graphic that we've been using throughout the demonstrations. You can see that in the property pane there is a value property and a button that I can select that will bring up the common tag browser. The reason I say that it's a common tag browser is because it will be the same browser used for not only the View application but your Logix project as well, giving you the exact same look and feel between the two environments for doing your tag browsing. The tag browser now appears, and in its default view it shows me all of the controllers that I've associated with this application. In our demonstration today, it's just the one controller that we configured, the instances controller. Within the tag browser, in order to drill in deeper, you use the arrow icon that you see. By clicking on the icon, I've now drilled down one step further within that controller application, and I'm presented with both the controller scope tags and properties as well as the programmed scoped tags. In this case, I want to associate the tank level, okay, with a tag within the filler D program. So I've selected that. It should come up here. There you go, and now I'm looking at all the tags that are contained within that particular program file. The same search capability that Gordon showed you for the toolbox is also available within the tag browser. So I can enter tank, click enter, and it will show me all of the tags that have tank as part of the name. sorry. I'm sorry, there's my tank 1 tag. Now I can drill into that, and to select an actual tag, I double-click it. So I've double-clicked on the level, and I've now associated that tag with my tank so that it updates in real time on the display. If I select the tag browser for a property that is already bound, you can see that my tag browser comes up and it launches with context. It takes me right to the previously defined tag. And I can also use the breadcrumbs across the top to go back if I wanted to select a different tag or a different program file to browse into. Okay, so that's a quick preview of the new tag browser and the capabilities that it will have. There's 2 more concepts that I'd like to briefly talk about in this demo, and that's the color animation capability as well as the events and commands capability. In order to show you that, I'm going to select the pump that we've placed on this display. And the pump, again, is one of the tens of hundreds of graphic elements that we'll have in the toolbox that Gordon showed you. And Gordon was being very truthful when he told you that all of the graphic elements in the toolbox not only look very good, but are also smart objects. We've exposed the properties that you'd want to animate. So this pump actually has 2 color properties that represent the pump fill and also the status area of the pump, which is this aqua blue area. And if I want to animate the color of either of those properties, I just select the Animations tab on in my Properties window, and I'm presented with a nice, easy-to-use color range table. And it, by default, has both of those color properties selected, the fill of the pump and the status of the pump. But I can also pull down the arrow and just select one of those properties if I desired. What you can do in the color table, you can see I've bound this particular pump to the Tank Master pump tag, and I can define ranges. In this case, it's a digital example, either the pump is on or off. So I've defined a range to represent when that tag has a value of 0, what the color I want to be for the status tag, and also for the fill color of the pump. Likewise, when that tag changes to a 1, I can select the gold color to show that it would be running the orange juice through it, as well as a different color for the fill color. Now, of course, this color range table will be used also for more analog type examples. So the number of ranges I can define is unlimited, and they can be analog in nature as well. So I could come up here and define a range of 2 to 20 as an example, and select different colors for that particular range or state. And then the way the color animation will work at runtime, as Gordon will show you, is the list of ranges that I've configured evaluates from top to bottom at runtime, and when a value returns a true condition, the graphic will automatically update and show the colors that we defined for that particular state. If none of the colors, or if none of the values return a true value when we go through that, that's what the purpose of this default state is here, in that the object will return and use its default colors that were defined in the properties. So one of the big advantages here over our existing factory top view product is that the ranges allow you to define a fairly complex color animation without having to type in a full expression. You can just bound to a tag directly and use the table as a way to do your logic. Now, with that said, we will support full expression capability in the View Designer, so you do have the capability to type in a full expression if you're doing an even more complex type of animation. The last thing I'd like to quickly show you is our events and commands capability. So if you were demoing this capability to your customer, you showed your customer how easy it is to configure this color animation for the pump, they may ask you, well, how do I configure that pump so that when I touch it, it actually turns on and off? And if you were demoing that with PanelView Plus today, you could get through that demo. You would show how you can drop a button on a screen, and for each state of that button, you can associate a bitmap with it. But the mechanism that you'll be able to demo with the View Designer will be a lot easier, because we've taken the command capability that we have in View SE today, and we've brought that right down to the panel view level of product. And let me show you what I mean by that. I've got the pump selected, I've got my Events tab selected, and you can see that I've defined a touch event for the pump. And I've associated a toggle command with that touch event, so that each time the pump is pushed, we will toggle the tank master pump control and effectively start and stop the pump. You can associate either a single command with a touch event, or you can associate multiple commands with that event. And I'll pull down the command list that we have currently supported, just to show you some of the commands that we'll support. Commands like log on and logging off for security. Navigation commands, so that you can touch an object and navigate to a different screen, as well as the value commands that we've just talked about, whether you're toggling a value, incrementing it, or writing a specific value to it. We'll also be adding additional commands to this as we continue to develop the product. So we'll have a command for switching languages on the terminal, or doing an alarm acknowledgement as an example. So we'll have a full list of commands available. The last thing that I'll talk to you quickly about is on the tank detail screen. Gordon showed you the definitions that we defined, the parameters that we defined for this screen, and he showed you how convenient it is to create a shortcut to that screen and pass values to these parameters when the screen is navigated to. Another way that you'll be able to do that is if I go back to the tank overview screen, you can see that we had 3 buttons on there, tank 1, 2, and 3 detail. Okay? If I select one of those buttons and go to the Events tab, you can see that we set this up so that, again, we're doing a touch event. You can also do key events so that you can attach events to keys, physical keys on the terminal. But in this case, we're doing a touch event. We selected a navigation command that will go to the tank detail screen, and you can see that you're presented with all of the parameters that you defined for that screen, so that you can pass tags into those parameters or literal values into those parameters when that screen is navigated to. So just another example of how the events and commands can be used within the View Designer. So with that said, I'm going to turn things back to Ron.
Okay, thanks, Mark. All right, so one of the other things that we can do, and I think Mark started to allude to it, is that any of the properties that we have in the property pane of the design environment allow you to tie to a number of different things. First off, you can put a literal value in for the property. So, for example, if I've got a visibility attribute, I could specify that I want it visible or hidden based on the attributes in there, and there'd be an enumerated list for some of the items. I could also link those items and bind them actually to a tag in Logic. So there's this binding capability where I can take this visibility that was a literal value and switch it to where it's going to get its selection from some other data source. And the data sources can be a tag in Logic. I could link to another element's property. I could link something, for example, to a system attribute on the operator interface, and this would be the equivalent of like the app that finds that would exist in the View product today. Or I could actually embed a full expression that could include, commands and the like that are going to be executed dynamically when the object is being refreshed on the screen. So you have a lot of flexibility and a lot of power. Really gives you the ability to kind of fine-tune and customize and automate many of the processes for how the element is going to be presented at runtime. And in many cases can even provide a substitute for some of the scripting capabilities that are there today in some of the existing products. This shows an example of the expression capabilities. Again, I could anywhere that I could reference a tag, I could put in a full expression. Very similar to what you have today in Vue SE. We're providing a expression editor in the environment that will allow you to put in the expressions, the various references to tags and the like. You could do math operations, if-then-else types of logics. But really you have kind of real ultimate flexibility on how you want this to execute and when it actually operates in the runtime environment. And as far as commands, Mark already touched on this, so I'm going to skip this particular slide. One of the other new capabilities that we're adding, something we call logics metadata. And what this is, you can almost think about it as, traditionally, in an HMI environment, you would point your graphical element at a tag in logics, and you would be able at runtime to be able to get at the data associated with that tag. But if you needed something like a high or low limit to associate with that tag, you'd have to create other tags, store that information in it, or you'd have to create an HMI tag, point it at the logics tag, and add those additional attributes to it. What metadata does is actually takes those settings and actually stores those in the logics environment. And so for each tag in logics, we can now get at the tag value itself, which in this case would be motor speed. I could get at the name of the tag and actually present that on my object, my add-on graphic that I'm creating. I could get at the description, actually incorporate that. I can get at the min and max values. I can get at an engineering unit. And I could even get to linked associated items, like in this case an alarm that might be linked to the particular tag that I'm looking at. So the nice part is when I'm defining the information in logics, and here we have actually a screen of what you would see in the logics designer, is that if I select my tag, you'll see a new property window that shows up, and the metadata attributes are visible and accessible here. Now in logics, it only uses these if you actually put values in them, so it doesn't take up space in the logics controller if they're not being used. But the nice part is I can link to that single tag in this case. So when I pointed at the tag that I'm going to reference, it would link and grab all of this information with a single reference. So it provides more productivity over and above what you would have seen in past products, and gives you access to things that you wouldn't have been able to access before. With that, we'll shift gears, and Gordon will give you a demonstration on the terminal.
Just like the slide shows, we're going to do a demo of it actually running real on an actual terminal. And so Mark and I, before this started, had set up a kind of remote view into the terminal so that you guys can see it and watch me interact with it on the terminal itself. Both Cheryl and Ron had discussed that the 5500s are going to have a physical navigation button on the bottom of the terminal. So we've got the screen up, and I want to show you what happens when I press it. I'm going to press it right now. What you'll notice is that the screen that's active kind of has a slight shadow over it, and the navigation hierarchy automatically appears, and this navigation hierarchy matches the same organizational structure that you use to lay out your screens in the Project Explorer in Vue Designer. So you can see that I had 4 screens that were created, and I can immediately navigate to those, but I'm just going to hit the home button first to show you what happens when I hit home. It takes me to the home screen that was specified, which is the production dashboard. And I'm sorry for those in the WebEx, we can't really zoom into the screen any larger, so you'll have to zoom in on your client if you want to see it a little bit closer. Next, I'm going to go ahead and press the button, and we're going to navigate over to the tank overview screen where we can take a look at those tanks that Mark had so wonderfully configured to see them actually filling and lowering automatically. Below the tanks, there were the buttons, the navigation buttons that Mark had configured with the property specified for tank 1. So I'm going to press that first one, and you'll see that I automatically navigate to the tank 1 detail. I can hit the back button using a navigate back command, and then I'll go to tank 2. And the same thing, tank 2's details are now being displayed. In the upper left-hand corner, I put in, for the sake of this demo, a text input just to show you how that would work. We've got the text input soft keyboard that automatically appears can be a numeric version of it or a string version of it. And here's where I can erase the contents and type something new. You may remember that Mark had configured the start and stop pump buttons as well as the pump to control this particular tank's pump. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the stop pump. And when I change that value, you'll notice that the color animation that kicked in that Mark had specified for the fill color and status of that pump, and it automatically changes for us. Next, we'll go over to our control logic screen, which shows us the chassis that we're using to drive the demo itself. And what you'll see is all the status LEDs reflect what's actually happening on the hardware itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is toggle the input bits. So I'm going to move the mouse over to which input bits you'll notice it change, which will be on the DC input 8 to 9 to 10. So you may hear the click of me actually hitting the buttons over the phone, but I'm just kind of going back and forth through them so that you can see that they update pretty quickly, just like you'd hope. And again, the data that comes from tags we can just provide as tag data and link it once, and you're pretty much done. For the Ethernet and controller modules, there's more sophisticated information that's not accessible as tags, so we've done the hard work to harvest that information, but you just need to give the path to those devices. And what we're going to release in R1 can't be every product that we sell that has information that's accessible. So we've chosen the most popular ones, and we're kind of at the 95.5. So we've got 95% of what it is that you're going to use that's going to be done. And you don't have to write any logic code to make that work. So the other interesting thing is, if I were to pull the Ethernet cable, how would you expect it to react? Traditionally, with traditional HMI systems, when data quality just kind of disappears, elements just fail to be able to render the data, so they kind of look blank. We call it wireframing with some of our existing products. And it's not really easy to troubleshoot, because regardless of where I'm at, I will probably have some sort of diagnostic banner that comes up that has a whole slew of events that show from where the point of error originated to where the error gets displayed. There may be many different levels of software it goes through. The diagnostics logs may show many different things, and it's difficult to correlate because there's just gobs and gobs of data because they're all smashed together in the diagnostic log. Well, what's great about the panel view, the panel view 5500, 5300 is that every place where there's an error that is detected as an error in the system, you see that these red X's appear. And some of those red X's have numbers on them. That means that there's more than one system error that's been detected in that location. And in order to make them so that they're all accessible and clickable, we kind of group them together in a numbered sequence. So if I were to check out what's up with the available time and click that, a handy pop-up shows up that explains to me the origination of the problem, which is a tag is involved, the property of where the destination of the data is supposed to go, as well as the description of what the problem is. So instead of giving you lots of different errors that aren't real helpful throughout the chain, we're able to resolve it down to the root problem and describe it in a human-friendly way. And in this case, it says that our controller is not reachable. And there's more than one error. I can just slide over to the next one and see that error is there too. And so if I want to dismiss this, I can easily just click off of it, or I can even click the X. But there's one other thing that I wanted to demonstrate, and that is I'm going to go ahead and plug the Ethernet cable back in, because oftentimes some of these problems kind of can come and go. And if I'm in the middle of diagnosing that there's a problem that has occurred, I may not want the errors to just automatically disappear. So here, let me plug this back in. and we just need to wait a little bit of time for the system to do its recovery process. And the other good thing that I'll mention real quick while we're waiting for it to recover is that if by chance an error happens and it appears and disappears, you can always go back to the log to get the full information. So just because someone wasn't watching it, or you're in the middle of looking at one problem trying to diagnose it and you weren't able to go back to the other, you wouldn't lose your ability to see what's going on. So with that, I don't know if we're going to have any, I think we're ready. Are we ready now to open it up for questions? Oh, there's more slides. And you can see, I was ready to transition over the slides, but you can see what happens is all the errors that resolve themselves automatically continue to update the way they were. And if you were trying to diagnose a problem, maybe it was an intermittent problem where problems were coming and going, you wouldn't have wanted to just disappear on you, but we provide an indication that problem has now been fixed with the strike-through in the text. So we'll kick it back over to Ron.
Okay, so closing in on the final stretch here. One of the things that the Tnhh 5000 is going to utilize for alarming is actually the Logix-based alarm instructions that are available in Logix today. So that does a number of things for you. Avoids you having to actually create and configure alarm setup in the HMI. Simply all you do is, as we saw earlier, is point it at the controller. We'll have a pre-created alarm summary screen that looks and feels pretty much like you see in USE today, that will link to and utilize the alarm capabilities that are in Logix. So we'll get an automatic feed of or notification of alarms that are occurring, avoids that redundant development. You get faster and more accurate time stamping. And again, minimizes the amount of setup and configuration that you've got to do. One of the other premier capabilities that we're adding is the ability to actually do very high-speed deterministic control for example, jog operations. We've got a new instruction that is actually being incorporated into the Logix controller called the high-speed or HMI button control. And what happens essentially is you map the Tnhh 5000 into the Logix I/O tree, which essentially sets up a I/O class of communications, that class 1 connection we talked about earlier, to the terminal. That connection gives us status information both directions. I can tell in the terminal that the controller is in run mode. The controller can actually tell that the terminal is there and talking and operating in the status of it. But what happens then is we pass information back and forth. The next step is you drop the button control instruction into your Logix project, and then in your view designer, you put in a button and point it at the tag associated with the button instruction. And basically behind the scenes it does all the association and links up all the data so that when you press that button within 100 milliseconds you can actually control the output. Better yet is if the communications were to fail, the instruction will automatically reset the output. So you avoid the situation of having to put extra logic in your Logix controller to detect that the terminal isn't talking and resetting bits and things like that. That work will be done for you automatically by the use of the button control instruction. But we'll be able to control things very high speed, very deterministically, in fact in rates that are faster, frankly, than any HMI is able to do with controllers today. Another capability, again, we're taking some of the things that were done in Logix in the past and actually incorporating, or done in the HMI in the past, and actually incorporating them into Logix. So trending and data logging are examples of that. And we'll support the ability for the terminal to be able to collect data through its normal communications and be able to capture that for trending purposes. But we're also going to take advantage of the high-speed trending that Logix has today. So for example, in Ars Logix, I can create a trend that can capture data down to a millisecond. What's happening essentially is the Logix controller is collecting that data and forwarding it to Ars Logix 5000. The View 5000 will be able to take advantage of that trend and be able to present that same high-speed information. So we'll be able to actually utilize trend captured at rates in View 5000 that no other operator interface is able to do. And then, well, similarly, we've taken the data capture capabilities that traditionally were done in the HMI and actually pushing that down into Logix as well. So part of your Logix project you have the ability to, as depicted here in the bottom left, you have the ability to configure data logs and set up how you want that information to be logged. And essentially the controller is going to do that as part of a background task, collect that information and store it within the controller's memory. The terminal then can access that information, upload the log information, be able to present it to a user, as well as be able to export it so that it can be removed from the system by like an SD card or a USB memory stick for further analysis in some third-party tools. Again, being able to capture that information and access it at much faster speeds than any other HMI. One of the other things that we're doing is we're implementing security in a way that allows the security information to be retained within the project file itself. So that some of the issues that we had in the past where the directory would impact multiple project files, we'll actually avoid that by having the files, the projects themselves, contain the security settings within them. And this is great for an OEM or a systems integrator that needs to move back and forth between different projects for different customers. They don't have to deal with some of the headaches of setting up and managing the security system. Basically, the security is fully administered in the design environment in the first release. In the future, we plan to provide some central management, but for now, in the initial release, it's all project-based. A couple of things, we've got some predefined roles that allow you to make it easy to set up what the users can do, and you have some control over what those roles can do on a screen-by-screen basis. We're also going to set up a default user, we call it the guest user, and what that is the capabilities that you want to provide for the terminal when no user is logged in. So this allows you maybe to have, maybe the operator doesn't have to log in, but the maintenance person or the supervisor needs to log in. You could set up a guest operator to do certain things in a restricted mode, but then set up what you want the maintenance and supervisors to be able to do and give them more access to things, whereas the operator might only be able to view things but not be able to change things. So it gives you more flexibility, but also provides you the ability, out of the box, if you don't want security, you give that guest user full access to everything, in which case you don't need to actually configure security. So you have full flexibility over how you set up and manage this. We're also going to support both passwords and a PIN capability, so for the smaller terminals like a 4-inch, you can use a PIN instead of having to type in a full password. As we touched on earlier, we are going to support application language switching. And in the design environment, you'll be able to choose the languages that you want to support for the application that you're building, and then be able to import and export the text and translate that information. And then we'll be able to even switch the language that's visible in the designer as well as at runtime on the terminal. There'll be a command that allows you to maybe through a button choose the language that you want to be visible. But this allows an OEM or a systems integrator to build one application that could be shipped globally with multiple languages in it. We also want to support the ability to migrate and retain the investment that our customers have made in our existing applications. So we're actually planning to provide a conversion tool that will take the application content out of, for example, a ViewME application and be able to convert that so that it can be brought forward into the PanaView 5000. I think out of the gate, we'll probably focus our efforts on things like the displays and the screen content. As we add in the future other capabilities to the product, we will continue to round this out and add additional functionality. There's a bunch of other capabilities that we do plan to support in the first release, which we did not present here. So things like search and replace, undo, redo, copy and paste capabilities, so I can move content between projects. There's also, as was depicted in some of the screens, a configurable status bar across the top of the screen that would be visible on all the screens. We're also going to localize the design environment. So I think at the initial release, it will be English only, but we're setting up the design environment so it can be localized, and hopefully within a few months of shipping the English version, we'll come out with local versions for other countries. The other thing is the PanaView 5000 is actually going to leverage the same firmware update tool that the rest of the logic system uses. So we're going to be using Control Flash to perform firmware updates. You'll be able to upload and download applications via USB as well as Ethernet. So we can load the application directly over Ethernet or via a connected USB port. We're also going to provide a test run capability so you can run the application on the PC, test it out, and it will actually communicate to a live controller to get its data and actually animate what's going on while it's running on the PC. And there's even going to be a diagnostic viewer that will allow you to see any the diagnostic messages that Gordon showed when like the error or the communications were disabled, and be able to even export the diagnostic log so you could work with it in a third-party tool. While we've got a lot of capabilities in the first release, there's a lot of things that we still aren't going to have in that first release. I think that's really important to know is that, you know, it's probably more critical that when you start looking at specific applications that you contact us early on to make sure what's there and what's not. Because, you know, it's really important to not oversell the product and maybe set expectations above where the product's going to be. It's going to take a few years for us to fully round out the capabilities, so just, you know, keep that in mind. It's probably, I would say, it's probably better to assume that the capability isn't there and ask us than to assume that it is there and potentially get in trouble. There's a long list of some of the things that we know aren't going to be part of the first release, and so it's important for you to know that, and I'm not going to cover it in detail here. Timing-wise, as we said, we're going to launch the PanelView 5500 and the 5300 terminals in the second half of the next calendar year, so 2012. And that's going to bring in a lot of capabilities to be able to go after, I would say, smaller to mid-range types of OEM-type applications. We do have a lot of differentiators there with the high-speed access, the high-speed logging, the high-speed jog capabilities, and the object-oriented design capabilities that set us apart from many of the products that are in the market today. Going forward, the next round is to focus on a PC-based solution with thin client access. We're also planning to round out the environment to support communications to some of the legacy controllers as well as the pre-ICE Logix controllers as well. So as we talked about earlier, there is a dependency on a particular flavor of Logix controllers. With the future releases, we plan to move beyond that. And then going further into the future, we do plan to provide a much larger solution that would be multi-thin as well as thick clients, really focused at end-user types of applications, you know, continue to round out the overall capabilities and provide better system management stuff as well as interaction with third-party software packages. So again, we're going to continue to enhance and extend this capability as we go forward. In many respects, it's very similar to what happened with Logix. I mean, when it first released, it had some really interesting and intriguing capabilities and could work for some smaller, maybe simpler applications. But if you needed some specific capabilities, you may have had to wait a few releases to get that capability in. Okay, so to finish this off, as we talked about earlier, we are dependent with the new PanelView 5000 on the new vintage of Logix controllers, the L7X, L3, L2, L1 controllers that are going to be coming out over the course of the next year. So it's really important that you start looking at migrating applications and customers over to use those new controllers so that when the View 5000 product releases, that we have, you know, installed base of customers and applications that could start to leverage the new product and be able to utilize its capabilities. As we said, we're continuing to extend and enhance the existing product line, and we'll continue to support PanelView and FactoryTalk View for many years to come. Again, reiterating the timing here, new release of this product is second half of next year. As we said, the capabilities will be phased in over multiple releases in multiple ongoing years. The initial public offer or introduction is currently slated for November at Automation Fair. And as we said, we're going to have product on the floor to be able to do demonstrations. We're going to be doing demonstration sessions. I'm also planning to set up private demonstration sessions so that customers that want to see this in a little bit more of a private setting and be able to ask more questions, we'll be scheduling sessions where we can do that as well. So for today, you know, your call to action is to continue to focus on selling the existing product and continue to focus on trying to migrate our customers forward to the newer vintage of Logix controllers.